I'm starting. Hopefully it'll work like this. I'm just doing 2 windows. The people watching the videos later will not see the canvas face. You will only see the Prezi. Hear a disembodied voice. The people who are here right now, you can see me. You could probably turn me off if you want to. So where we left off, unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about, categorical logic. And hopefully you watched that little extra video that I uploaded on Thursday, when it just really seemed like everyone, including myself, was quite distracted by the election. So I thought it'd be easier just to upload something to keep us in the game, you know, but at the same time, let's really get into it now. Okay. So let me skip over this. Maggie with validity. Did you forget that gremlins are bad? Sometimes people forget that gremlins are bad. And they think that when you find a gremlin, okay, you did not forget that gremlins are bad. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can take a look at anything that people, well, of course I can't see your work. That's one of the difficult things about it. But if you want to send me your work, for example, you know, if you have your proof, your shortcut method or whatever, and you're not sure where you went wrong, you could send that to me as a picture file, and I'll take a look at it. Yeah. Well, maybe this time you will get it, Maggie. All right. You must be on the cusp. Yeah. So really, especially if you're very eager to really get it, go ahead and send me your work, and then I can go over, you know, what went wrong. Yeah. Or else just go back to the videos where I go over the proofs, over how to do the shortcut method. Right. Okay. So now we're going to do categorical logic for a week and a half, maybe, something like that. Not too long, hopefully. And then we'll just have a few things to do, and then we'll be done. Right? And really, propositional logic and categorical logic are kind of the biggest ones, because you have to learn a whole system. You have to learn a whole language. You know, these are technically, actually, they are called languages because they have a syntax and a semantics, right? The semantics is just true or false. It's what it means. The statement either corresponds to reality or it doesn't. That's the semantics. And the syntax is the rules, right? You learned all the rules for propositional logic. And now we're doing categorical logic, where it's just slightly different. Right? Validity is still the main concept, and validity still means the same thing, right? So even in categorical logic, validity means that if all the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Okay? And so this is where we left off, right? Just as in propositional logic, you only have 4 basic types of operators to deal with, right? Remember the 4: conjunction, disjunction, conditional, negation. Just 4. You have to learn the truth tables for. Here you have 4 basic types of statements that you should learn the terminology for, right? You have universal affirmative statements. That means they're saying something positive about the whole group. Remember, when we're talking about category statements, we're talking about an entire group of something, right? So when we say all S are P, it's as though we're imagining all the S's in the world, whatever S refers to, right? S can refer to cats, it can refer to lamps, it can refer to octogenarians, it can refer to presidents of the United States, right? It can refer to an individual even. That's a little awkward, but yes, it can refer to anything as long as we're talking about the entire group, right? So when we make a universal affirmative statement, we're saying all the members of the category S are also members of the category P, right? So imagine 2 big circles, right? Here's all the S's, here's all the P's, and we're saying that all the S's are also P's. That's a universal affirmative. As opposed to a universal negative, where we're saying something about all the S's as well, but we're saying, you know, all those S's, none of them are also P's. None of them are in the P category, right? All the members of the S category are outside of the P category altogether. That's a universal negative. And then we can also make statements about particular members of the group, right? We can say, well, there's at least some members of the group S that are also members of the group P, right? What's an example? Well, we had examples earlier, right? But you could think of yourself. You're a student, right? Some students are female, right? Some students are male, right? Some students are under 20. Some students are over 20, right? So we're saying there's some members of this category who are also members of this other category, right? So there are some members of the category students who are also members of the category people who are over 20 years old, right? They overlap to some extent, is what we're saying. Yeah. But you can also say about some members of the group S and say that they're not P, right? So some members of the group students are not over 20. You see how that works? You know, so we can make universal affirmative statements and universal negative statements, and we can make particular affirmative statements and particular negative statements. Okay. Any questions so far? It's just when you see the all S or P, just know you can plug anything into the S's and anything into the P's, as long as they are nouns, right? We can't be saying things like all students are young, right? You'd have to say something like all students are young people, right? It's okay to make it a noun phrase. You can have an adjective in there, but you just have to turn it into the primary thing is the member of a category, and that has to be a noun. Yeah. So this is all review. We did this last time. So you should be able to pretty easily recognize which of the forms these are, right? Which, whether it's a universal affirmative or universal negative. I believe we did this last time, and people got this, so I'm not going to make you do it again. Is that right? Did we go through them all? I can't remember. Do you want to go through them? I mean, if you look at the last one, I purposely phrased it. It's kind of funny, right? No couches or objects meant to be eaten. It's just a way of saying you shouldn't eat couches, right? Which I tend to think is true, right? But I put it in this categorical statement so that we have the category couches and the category objects that are meant to be eaten, right? And we're saying here that if you're a member of the couch category, you are not a member of the objects meant to be eaten category. Well, you know, I let my brain just come up with the first thing, and then I try not to question it too much. So they're not all fun, but yes, every now and then something weird will pop in my head, and I'll allow it. Okay, so overall, hopefully that's clear. I think the perhaps the most tricky thing will be that when we're talking about S's and P's, you have to always turn them into nouns, right? Objects, as it were, rather than adjectives or anything like that, right? So again, if you were to make a particular negative statement, right? Suppose you wanted to talk about some cats. Some cats are not cute, right? Heresy, right? Okay, but let's say some cats are not cute. Well, that's not quite ready for categorical logic, right? You have to turn that into a noun, cute. So you'd have to say something like, some cats are not cute things, or some cats are not cute cats, or some cats are not cuties, if you wanted to put it that way. That's all allowed as long as you are maintaining the same meaning. You just put it into noun form, right? Because again, categorical logic is about groups and the members of that groups. So they have to be concrete sort of members of a group, not just free-floating adjectives like cute. It has to be a cute thing that you could put into a box or into a circle. Okay. So recap so far, just intro to categorical logic. right? We've saw that you can make deductive arguments just using those kinds of categorical statements where you use all, some, or no. And you can do that and create 4 different types of categorical statements, right? The universal affirmative, universal negative, particular affirmative, particular negative. Okay. So hopefully you can get yourself to just memorize the terminology. And again, just like with propositional logic, the terminology just says what it means, right? It's a universal. You're talking about all the members. Affirmative, saying something positive. Affirmative is positive. So you're saying all of them are like this, right? Universal negative, you're saying all of them are not like that. Of course, it comes out as saying no SRP. That's how you end up saying it. But notice you're still talking about all the members of that category, right? And then you can make particular statements about particular members of the category, right? Some members of that category are S or RP, or some members of that category are not P. Okay? One thing to keep in mind as well is that some, all you can assume is that it's at least one member. Okay? So some in everyday language usually means multiple, right? More than one. In logic, it does not. In logic, some is going to mean at least one. So when I say some SRP, that means there's at least one member of the category in S. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So this is one of these times where the meaning, the everyday meaning of the word changes slightly, where usually in everyday context, some means a few, at least, right? In logic, it's going to mean simply at least one member of the category that we're talking about, okay? So all means all the members, no means none of the members, some means at least one. Probably more, right? When I say some students are over 20, yeah, all I'm really saying is at least one student is over 20. So that's going to be true just in case even just one person is over 20 who's also a student. Of course, there are many more, and that's fine, but in logic and categorical logic, some means at least one. So get that in your head. Okay. So before we move on, we did the same thing last time. It's helpful to have vocabulary to talk about these kinds of statements so that we can quickly refer to the different parts and know what we're talking about. All right, so let's just look at any kind of categorical statements. All doctors are graduates. Right. So again, before I do the vocabulary, just imagine in your head that you've got a circle with all the doctors in it. Right. And then you've got a circle with all the graduates in it. What we're saying here is that all the members of the doctor club are also members of the graduate club, right? If instead of a category, we could talk about a club, right? Or instead of a group, we could talk about a club. We could use all these words interchangeably, right? It's just fun to sometimes think of it that way. Think of it when we're talking about people, it might be easier that way, right? It is kind of like that. Doctors all belong to the doctor club, don't they? Graduates all belong to the graduate club. Maggie, we're going to start with just one circle, then move to 2, and then move to 3. Okay. I mean, in a way, we're actually starting with 2 circles, but I'm going to introduce the idea of a single circle, but you'll see. The 3 circles, at that point, we are symbolizing arguments, and you don't have to go beyond that. Okay. You could get more complicated, but we won't. We're going to stick with arguments that have 2 premises in this case. With propositional logic, we could use the shortcut method easily to do multiple premises, 3 or 4 or 5. We can't do that with categorical logic if we're going to stick to just 3 circles, and that's what we're going to do. So for all the categorical logic problems, we'll always only have 2 premises and a conclusion, right? And so what that means is you're going to learn how to symbolize those 2 premises with circles that overlap each other, and then a third circle to represent the two premises. You'll see what this all means. I like to give you a preview, right? So you'll learn how to represent two premises using three circles. And then once you've represented them, then you can simply look at what you have and see if it also states the conclusion. Because remember, if the argument is logically valid, if it's deductively valid, then the conclusion is already entailed by the premises. Right? We've seen that in propositional logic, but maybe it wasn't clear. But now it'll be represented visually, so you will see it. When you plot, when you symbolize a valid categorical argument, all you need to do is plot the premises, and then the conclusion will show up all on its own. So you won't be looking for gremlins this time. This is maybe a little bit more intuitive. You're actually going to be looking for the conclusion. And if it's there, the argument is valid. And if it's not, it's invalid. You'll see what that all means. Okay. So back to vocabulary. So all doctors are graduates, right? It's saying something about the whole category of doctors, right? That's the primary thing you're talking about, right? It's not, I doubt that it's worse than propositional. If you get the basics here. With propositional logic, I think it's easy to get, even if you know the rules, when you have all the T's and F's, and you're trying to keep track of them all, that can get confusing very quickly. So it takes more skill and more just mental acuity in keeping track of everything to do propositional logic. Categorical logic might be just as difficult to learn the basics of, but once you learn it, it's a lot simpler. At least that's what I think. It should be, you'll be the judge for it. Okay. Yes, it was very mathy. Yeah. Okay. So this is just like regular, if you take an English class, you'll learn the same thing. Right? When you have a statement, all doctors are graduates, doctors is the subject term, right? It's the subject of the sentence. That's the thing we're talking about, right? We're primarily talking about all the members of the group, doctors, and we're saying something about them, right? That means that that's the subject term. And graduates is the predicate term, okay? So that's just vocabulary, but it is, if you've taken an English class, you already know this, right? When you've learned how to parse a sentence, you learn about the subject and the predicate, the object, and things like that. Okay, so subject is the, doctors in this case is the subject term, graduates is the predicate term. Well, you don't have to learn a whole lot for this. Just understand subject and predicates. Subject is easy, right? Because we're already saying it. It's the subject, right? It's the subject that you're talking about, right? What's the subject of conversation here? It's doctors, right? The subject of the conversation is doctors. That's the primary thing we're talking about. Now, of course, we're also talking about graduates, but we're predicating having graduated of the subject, doctors. Okay, so when you have any statement SP, right, whether it's all S or P, no S or P, some S or P, some S are not P, in each case, the first thing, S, is the subject term. The second thing is the predicate term. Okay? It's a little bit like the antecedent and the consequent or something like that, right? The first part, we give it a name. The second part, we give it a name. And the word right in between that joins them together is the copula, right? You can think yourself about what other words you know that have copula as the roots, right? And it involves joining things together. Okay. When we're talking about the particular negative statement, the copula is are not, right? Are not. Here, I'll show you. So that when you this way you can just see what I mean, right? I've given you each of the kinds of statements, a universal affirmative, a universal negative, a particular universal, and a particular negative, right? You see that in each case, the thing that comes right after the category word, right? The category word being all, no, some, we'll give it an actual term. That's just what I'm calling it for now. Right after, that's the subject. Right? And then you get the copula, which is either are or are not. And then you get the predicates, which is the thing that you're saying about the subject. Okay, is that clear? So this is just a bit of vocabulary. Hopefully you'll just memorize it. Maybe you already know some of this. Some of you will know what a subject and a predicate are. Okay. Yeah, I guess see how quickly you can do this. This should be super easy, right? What the subject and predicate terms are. Take a minute. Okay, I'll wait a second. Just take a minute and see if you can figure out what the subject and predicate terms are. Yeah, in the exercise. Oh, you're not. Oh, I have not had it up for you guys this whole time. I'm so sorry. Oh man, I should go back then and show you everything. I have it up on my thing, but because of the way that I have it set up now, I forgot to share. No, it says I'm sharing my screen. Okay, let me try it again. Because all the stuff I just said would be a whole lot clearer if you had the visual. So hold on. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, here we go. Okay. This is what I was trying. Okay, remember, so really quick, right? This is the recap that I was talking about. The universal affirmative, universal negative, particular affirmative. This whole time I thought this was up because I can see it, but you couldn't. So this was the review that I just went over, right? So that was the silly example. The no couches or objects meant to be eaten, right? That's universal negative. That's still not what I was just asking about. That's not the thing that I was just asking you about. This is now I'm traveling back into the past. This is what I was talking about 10 minutes ago. Okay. So this is the recap that I was talking about. Yeah. Sorry about that. But this is all, we did all of this last time. Okay. So this is just to remind you, right? We're doing deductive arguments. And instead of using propositional vocabulary, we're using the vocabulary of categorical logic, where we say all, some, and none. And we can turn that into 4 different kinds of statements, right? And that was these ones right here. Okay? Okay, yeah. Technical issues abound. It could have, overall, it all could have been a lot worse, though. Okay, so where were we actually? This is what I was talking about. The subject term, the predicate term, and then I have a nice little diagram to show you. So this is what I was thinking you're already looking at. Hopefully now it's clearer. Okay. Does everyone see? See why the subject is diamonds and bachelors and unicorns or paintings. They're the subject because that's the thing we're talking about. That's the subject of conversation. And then we're saying something about them. That's the predicate, right? We're saying all diamonds are precious gems. We're predicating being a precious gem. We're predicating that of diamonds is an awkward way of saying it, right? Yeah. And then the copula is just what joins the two, the subject and the predicate together, which in the first 3 cases will just be with are, and then in the last case, when we have the particular affirmative, it's going to be are not. Okay, that's all. Yeah, so not too complicated. It's just some vocabulary. So when I ask you, is the are involved in every case? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Because remember, even if you're talking about a singular thing, like if you had the statement Socrates is wise, okay, that's not ready. That's not ready for categorical logic. You have to say something like all people identical to Socrates, right? Or all Socrateses, right? You could pluralize the singular. All Socrateses are wise people, right? All people who are Socrates are wise people. That's how you'd have to translate it. In each case, it's going to be are. No, there won't be any copular words because it's always going to have to be plural, right? It's always going to be in that format. All, none, some. It's always going to be pluralized, right? It's always going to be all S's or no S's or some S's. Yeah, no, it's good to check. Absolutely, it's good to get that kind of stuff clear ahead of time. Yeah. Now, sometimes we'll find a sentence, like I said, right? Socrates is wise. The is functioning as a copula, but we haven't translated it yet into categorical type vocabulary, right? So that statement turns into all people who are Socrates are people who are wise. And now we have the are show up because we've pluralized the subject. Yeah. So you always pluralize and turn into the noun and turn into a noun the subjects and the predicates. So it'll always be joined by are or are not. Okay. So this was the exercise. So given that, this should be pretty easy, right? Because you've got the words like all, no, some, and then the word that's right after it is going to be the subject term, right? And the thing that you're talking about will be the predicate term. So for number one, vacuum cleaners, subject term, right? Machines, predicate term. Okay. So this is what I was asking you to do. Just think about this for a couple seconds. You don't have to write it down. Just see if you understand. If you had to do it, would that make sense, right? You don't have to use the word identical to Socrates. You can do it in your own way as long as you turn Socrates into a category, right? So like I said, you could say Socrateses, right? Just pluralize Socrates. Socrati, if you wanted to. It wouldn't be a big deal, right? I was also saying all people who are Socrates. That's fine as well. However, you can turn Socrates into a plural noun. Yeah, I mean, sometimes people use that. People encourage you to use it in that way, but you don't have to, right? I do it in that way, but it's a very awkward kind of philosophy verbiage to say identical to or identical with. It doesn't show up a lot outside of philosophy. But it's a big philosophy sort of verbiage to say all things identical with X, right? That sort of thing. So you could say, yeah, all things identical with Socrates or all people identical with Socrates. It just means all people who are Socrates. There happens to just be one of them, right? At least if it's the Socrates that we think we're talking about. But to do categorical logic, you can't talk about single things, right? You have to talk about the members of a whole entire group. Here, it's a group that has only one member, Socrates, but we're still talking about a group. Yeah. Yeah, and you can come up with your own way. If you have some other good way to turn Socrates into a noun, a plural noun, that would be fine as well. So now we get into the actual Venn diagrams, okay? So hopefully you get the basics, right? There's the four types of statements, and then we can use that vocabulary to talk about each of the parts of the statement. Right? So we've got the universal affirmative, all SRP. Right? S is the subject term, R is the copula, P is the predicate term. Right? And you can do that for each one of them. Okay. Sorry, I went through this through this too quickly. Right. Hopefully, then that makes perfect sense. Then that for number two, the subject term is robots, the predicate term is sentient beings. Right. For 3, the subject term is aliens. The predicate term is astronauts. The subject term is humans for 4, and the predicate term is astronauts. The subject term for 5 is cucumbers, and the predicate term is vegetables. Okay, we get this. Netflix shows is the subject term. Binge-worthy dramas, predicate term. Yeah. Speaking of binge-worthy, I just watched all of The Vow. Has anyone watched that? Now I'm watching Seduced. It's a documentary about this cult leader, Keith Raniere. It's pretty interesting. Okay, and no humans or cats, right? Humans, the subject term. Cats, the predicate term. Yeah, The Vow. So it's this guy Keith Raniere started this organization called NXIVM, and it was sort of a self-help group, but it was also a pyramid scheme. So you buy into it, you invest money, and it has a very strange sort of structure that for a while people were like, wow, I'm getting the best out of life. I'm being the best me because I'm part of this organization. But then it turns out that Keith Raniere and the top, the people at the top of the pyramid are really sketchy, and it turns into a weird sex cult, as cults tend to do. And now he's in jail for the rest of his life. Yeah. It's an interesting study in psychology, for sure. You remember the beginning of the semester we had talked about how you can get people to do something for you by small increments, the foot in the door phenomena. So a foot in the door phenomenon was definitely happening a lot. It often happens in cults, where first you just ask the people to do something small that's kind of weird, but then, once they've invested, they're more likely to keep doing all the weird stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the foot in the door phenomena. It's it's similar in a way, but not really, because Marilyn Manson was Marilyn Manson Charles Manson was always he was always, it was a very small group that he had, and it was very underground. Keith Raniere, it was a huge organization. He had ties with the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama came and visited him. Yeah, more along the lines of Jim Jones, perhaps, but it wasn't quite as religious. It didn't have those overtones as much. It was more philosophical. It was based in certain things, like, it had certain Scientology elements in it, actually, and some elements of Ayn Rand's objectivism, some good old-fashioned stoicism. So it was mostly a philosophy for bettering your life, but it has many of the same sort of structural elements that you see in any cult. Yeah, very charismatic leader, groupthink, all these things, exactly. Isolation from families, that was a big thing. If you want to reprogram someone, you have to cut off their ties from the rest of the world. Okay, we got off on a tangent, but it's a great show, and it ties into a lot of the critical thinking things we talked about, especially the psychological factors that we talked about at the beginning of the semester. You'll see a lot of these things happening. Yeah. Okay. Here, let's move on, even though I could talk about that all day. Okay. So first, we do start with a single circle just to talk about one category. Let's say students, right? And then you'll learn how to represent a categorical statement where you're talking about students are something. And then you'll learn how to represent two premises together using 3 circles. And once you get to that, then you'll easily be able to check the argument for validity. Okay, so it's really important to really stay focused on each step, so that once you get there, it ought to be easy. And again, we're not going to be using a whole bunch of little T's and F's and stuff like that. It's going to be much more straightforward. And like I said, if the argument that you've represented with those 3 circles, once you've represented 2 premises, if the argument is valid, you'll be able to just read the conclusion off of it, right, without doing anything else to it. Yeah, if you find the conclusion, it's valid because it's the same principle in play, right? In a valid argument, it's impossible to have true premises and a false conclusion, right? So with a Venn diagram, all we just do is, okay, let's suppose that the premises are true. Let me represent them as being true. Now, within that space of possibilities that I've created, does the conclusion show up on its own? If it does, the argument is valid, right? So it's simply a matter of you have an argument, premise, conclusion. Let me plot the premises on these three circles. Now, let me see. What did the conclusion of the argument say, and what do the three circles say? If the three circles confirm the conclusion, the argument is valid. So I'm just telling you how it works ahead of time so you understand the procedure. Of course, that won't make total sense yet until we actually do it. Okay, I'm just giving you the general idea. So let's just do a group or category of things, or a club, as you might want to call it, right? So let's say we wanted to talk about squirrels, right? It's a large worldwide club, right? There's squirrels all over the world. We can imagine that we want to talk about all of them. So all you need to do for that, to symbolize that, instead of saying all squirrels in the world, we can just do this. Right? Simple, right? This just means all the squirrels. It's not saying anything about squirrels. It's just a way of representing all the squirrels that there are, right? Here's a big circle. What's inside that circle? All the squirrels, right? You with me so far? Like I said, each step has to be clear, right? And here all we're saying is that's a way that you could represent something, right? If we wanted to talk about all the squirrels in the world, well, we could have this sort of convention where we say the circle means we're talking about a whole group of things, and then whatever you put underneath the circle says what group of thing you're talking about. Right? So here, if you have a circle and it says squirrels underneath, that means we're talking about all the squirrels that there are. We also could have said students. That would mean we're talking about all the students in the world. We could have said planets, and it means all the planets in the universe. You could put anything underneath there, and it automatically means we're talking about that entire category. So that should be easy. You should be able to do that with any statement, right? So I didn't turn this into an exercise, but if I wanted to say, okay, using a Venn diagram, represent the group tables. Well, that would be very easy. You draw a circle, and you write tables underneath of it, right? Or if I told you, using a Venn diagram, represent the group, what group? My brain is coming up blank. Somebody saying something, a group of anything. I already thought of something, but somebody's saying something, so. Well, it could be anything. All the phones in the world, right? If I were to ask you, use a Venn diagram, a Venn circle, it's not quite a diagram yet, it's just a circle, to represent the category of all phones. Yeah, write a circle, draw a circle rather, write phones underneath of it. Yeah, that's all you would do. Just to just represent a single group without even saying anything about the group, right? We're not saying that the squirrels are cute or that they eat nuts or anything. This is just a way of representing the fact that we want to talk about squirrels, right? We want to talk about the entire category of squirrels. That's super, super easy. Gets slightly more complicated when you want to talk about one of the four types of categorical statement. Remember, there's just four, right? Universal affirmative, universal negative, particular affirmative, particular negative. All S are P, no S are P, some S are P, some S are not P. Just 4 basic kinds, right? And so you need to learn how to use the circles to represent each of those 4. There's only 4. There's only 4. I like to remind people of that when we're doing propositional logic and categorical logic, that the foundation of it only involves 4 types of things, right? So it's the same sort of thing here. So these are our 4 types of statements, right? So what you need to do is learn how to use circles to represent each of these. So the first part is also easy. You just do the same thing you just did with a single circle, right? Where you have the circle and then you write underneath what you're talking about. But now you also do a second circle. And you make them overlap a little bit. So let's say we had the statement, all squirrels are omnivores, right? If you remember, omnivore means eats anything, right? Eats plants and meat, has a plant-based diet and a meat-based diet. I don't know if that's true about squirrels. Who cares? I don't know. It doesn't matter, right? It's just an example. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if squirrels, they're kind of scavengers, right? If you dropped a piece of fried chicken, I kind of imagine it would eat it, but yeah. But say you wanted to say that, right? Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right or wrong, if someone wanted to say all squirrels are omnivores, and we wanted to represent that. Well, we already know how to represent squirrels on its own, right? A circle with squirrels underneath of it, right? And we can do the same thing for omnivores. We can make a circle and write omnivores underneath of it. That's all you need to do to deal with each of them separately. But if you wanted to make it into an actual statement, you start like this. Remember, the subject term is on the left. It's whatever goes after the all, some, or no, right? And here the statement is all squirrels. So squirrels is the subject term, okay? So you start with that. Start with your subject term. Everyone knows what we're doing, right? I'm showing you how to diagram the statement, all squirrels are omnivores. And I'm starting with just doing a category type statement, just a category of things, squirrels. And then do the same thing for the predicate term, right? Which in this case was omnivores. See how it's useful to understand what a subject term is and the predicate term is, because I'll want to refer to them quickly in this way. So always remember, the subject term is whatever comes right after all, some, or no. And it's the thing that the sentence is about, right? What are we talking about? Squirrels. All right, so we put that one first, and then you do the predicate term, which is omnivores, and you put it right next to it. Right? So just like in the sentence itself, squirrels is on the left, omnivores is on the right. The subject term is on the left, the omnivore term is on the right. Right? It mirrors the construction of the sentence itself. Okay? Does everyone see it so far? So we're not quite done yet. We're just setting it up. Right? This means, you can look at any kind of statement and ask yourself, what is the subject term and what is the predicate term? Let me make those circles first. Good so far? Because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about any other groups. We're only talking about squirrels and omnivores. So let's just represent those and make them overlap. You'll see why. So like I said, the subject term goes on the left, right? Just as a matter of convention, always make sure you're doing that correctly, because it can get confusing otherwise. So you have a sentence or a premise, whatever it is that you're trying to plot, make sure you put the subject term on the left, just like you would in the sentence itself. So now how do we want to indicate the statement, all squirrels are omnivores, right? Right now, all we have is, there's these 2 clubs. There's the squirrel club and the omnivore club, but we haven't said anything about their relationship at all. Right? What we're wanting to say is, by the way, you can see my cursor, right? Can you see my cursor when I go over it? I'm circling it. Zombie squirrels, yeah. Okay, well, anyway, I hope you can see it. What we do, just as a matter of convention, this is just the way that you do it, but it makes a bit of sense. Just black out the part of the squirrel circle that's outside of the omnivore circle. Okay, like this. You see that? This now represents the statement, all squirrels are omnivores. Do you see that? So the black there represents absence, death, the dark void where nothing lives, right? No squirrels live in that blackened area, right? The statement, all squirrels are omnivores, is the same statement as, if you are a member of the group squirrel, you must also be a member of the group omnivores. Right? So it's saying, if you're a squirrel, you must live right here in that little zone, the overlap between omnivore and squirrels. Does everybody see that? Does that make sense? Yeah? It's basically saying, if there's any squirrels at all, they must be in this overlap. So that means if you live in the squirrel circle, you also live in the omnivore circle. But only, of course, in the omnivore circle that's also inside the squirrel circle, right? Outside of the squirrel circles, there's no squirrels at all, right? The squirrel circle is supposed to be all the squirrels, right? So again, imagine all the squirrels in the world rounded up and put into that squirrel circle, but they cannot be in that black area. We cannot put them there, right? We've represented that as being blacked out. So then where are we going to put all those squirrels? They have to be in the squirrel circle, but they cannot be in the black part of the squirrel circle because that represents death and nothingness, the void. So they must go into that little part of the squirrel circle that's also inside the omnivore circle. That's, of course, and that makes sense. Then that means if we put all our squirrels there, all squirrels are omnivores, right? All members of the squirrel club are also members of the omnivore club. Good so far? Oh wait, is it? Wait, we start. Oh no, we're good. I thought I thought it was like 2. We're okay. Does that make sense? I mean, you can also just memorize that this is how you represent any universal affirmative statement. Any statement that goes all S or P is going to look like this. Okay, but it helps if you can understand that the blackness represents something. Yeah, this is just for universal affirmatives, right? Exactly, because look what it's saying. It's saying that all the members of that group, in this case happens to be squirrels, but you could put anything there, are also members of this other group that you put down, right? There's no squirrels outside of the omnivore group. Right? That's what the black represents. Okay? So maybe that'll make more sense if I do another one. So again, if it's white, if it's left open, it means that there could be a member, right? It doesn't mean that there has to be a member, because I could have also said all unicorns are creatures with horns, right? We don't want to actually say that there are any unicorns. It just means if there's any unicorns at all, they would also have to be in the horned creatures circle. No, the black color does not represent the word all exactly, okay? It represents the fact that there's nothing in that part of the circle. There are no squirrels in the black part of the circle. All the squirrels in the squirrel circle are in that little white part that's also overlapping the omnivore circle. Can you see my cursor where I'm pointing? You can't see the circle. I mean, my cursor. Can you see my cursor now? Oh, okay. You can see it there. Okay, very strange. Okay, so I was pointing at the wrong one, so this might help a little bit. Okay, so again, this circle represents all the squirrels that there are. Right? We're gonna put all the squirrels in there. But notice we made this part black, so we're not putting any squirrels there. They don't go there. Nothing goes in the black. So nothing. The black is not all. The black is nothingness. There's nothing there. So if we're going to put all the squirrels that exist inside the circle, where can we put them? Right here. Right here. Right? It's still inside the squirrel circle because we're talking about squirrels, right? So we can't. This is not talking about squirrels. Anything over here. Right? This is outside the squirrel circle. We've agreed that we're putting all the squirrels inside this giant category. All the squirrels are in here, but black means nothing can exist there. So the only space that squirrels can exist is right here. It's just a fancy way of saying if you're a squirrel, you're an omnivore. Right? If you exist as a squirrel creature, you also belong to the omnivore club automatically. That's what this statement is saying. Is that a little clearer then? So it is true that whenever you have a statement that says all SRP, Maggie, yes, they'll always look like this. Yeah. But all does not refer to the black part. Right? The black part is part of representing the statement, but it represents it in a kind of a, what you might think of it as a weird way, but it's actually not. All we're left with is a diagram that says, if you're a squirrel, if you're in the squirrel circle, you must be in the omnivore circle. You see that? Because the black means you can't put a circle there. There are no, squirrels. There are no squirrels in the black area. So if you're a squirrel, there's the third space for all other. Yes, exactly. Yeah, because there's going to be lots of other omnivores that aren't, that are not squirrels, right? So all this space you live here, right? Your dog lives here. Your cat lives here. There's all these other people and creatures that live in the omnivore circle. Okay, this part of the omnivore circle is reserved for squirrels. So notice that all squirrels exist right in that little area. Right? They exist in the squirrel circle, but not outside of the omnivore circle. Because that's what the statement is saying. It's saying there are no squirrels that are not omnivores, right? It's saying there are no squirrels out here. There are no squirrels outside of the omnivore circle because of the overlapping. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Notice we're all in these overlapping categories all the time, right? You are members of certain other groups. Right? Some of those groups I'm in as well. Some of those groups I'm not in, right? Some of you are in the category female. Some of you are in the category male, right? Some of you are not. Some of you are in the category older than 20. Some of you are in the category not older than 20. We share all these different categories, and they overlap in all these interesting ways. So here we're simply talking about two categories of beings, squirrels and omnivores. And we're saying all squirrels, right, all members of the group squirrels are also members of the group omnivores. Right? Not saying that all omnivores are squirrels, right? It's saying that all squirrels are omnivores. Right? So we're not really saying anything about omnivores here, right? Because again, this is not a statement about omnivores. It's a statement about squirrels. So anything that looks like this. So again, if the blacking out part of it doesn't make sense to you symbolically, although it'll be easier if you get that, you can at least just memorize this is what every universal affirmative looks like. Okay? Doesn't matter what you put in for the S's and P's, it's always going to look like this, right? All Socrateses are wise people will look like this. All professors are boring people will look like this. All tables have 4 legs. Not necessarily a true statement, but it would look like this. Okay? Because again, say it one more time, see if it clicks. What is this really saying, right? If we're talking about squirrels and omnivores, this is saying that if you're a squirrel, right, you must be inside this circle somewhere. But since this is all black, you can't be there. So that means we put all the squirrels right in here. Can't put them out here, of course, right? This is not squirrels. This is outside of the squirrel circle. Squirrels have to be inside the squirrel circle. Get those squirrels in their squirrel circle. It's hard to say. All the squirrels got to be right here in this cozy little spot that's white. Things can live there, right? So notice we're not committed to there actually existing any squirrels on this, right? This is not, it's what's called, this does not have existential import, right? Because we also want to talk about things like unicorns, right? All unicorns are horned creatures. We're not saying that there's any unicorns that exist in this diagram. It simply says if you are a unicorn, then you must be part of the horned creatures group as well, you know, because there's no unicorns outside of that circle. Okay. It's a little bit like conditional statements, right? If-then statements, they don't actually say that I'm going to eat the worm or that that you are going to give me $1 million. They don't make any commitment to that. It just says if this is the case, then this is the case. So if a squirrel exists, it cannot exist outside of the omnivore circle, right? Is what this is saying. If you think of a more classic example of a universal statement, all bachelors are male. So the subject term would be bachelor, the predicate term would be male, but we'd have to turn it into males, right? We have to turn it into a noun plural. All bachelors are males is what we have now. You represented the same thing. If you're a bachelor, if you're inside this group, you cannot exist outside of the male group, right? Because then you'd be a bachelorette or something else altogether. But if you're a bachelor, you have to be male. That's just what it means. That's what's called an analytic truth, right? That's what bachelor means. So you can know ahead of time that if someone is a bachelor, they are also in the male group. And anything outside of the male group will have to be blacked out because no bachelor can exist here. It makes no sense to say that there's a bachelor who's not a member of the males group. It simply makes no sense. That's a contradiction of terms. Okay. Maybe once we see more examples, it'll get clearer. So at the very least, you know what it looks like. It'd be nice if you understood why the blacking out area makes sense. Okay. But if it doesn't quite yet, you can at least understand any universal affirmative statement looks like that. So if I give you a universal affirmative statement, it's like looking at your truth tables or something, right? You have the reference there. You could simply use that. Yeah. Also, a reminder, really quick reminder. I think this goes more for people who are not actually showing up for class, or perhaps not even watching the videos. And some people got the truth table for the conjunction wrong. I just gave away what the answer was. But I mean, all you had to do is look at your truth tables, right? I told you could use your book. You could use your notes. You can use the prezzies. You can use whatever you want. So if I say, here's a truth table for one of the connectives, which connective is it? I mean, all you have to do is look at your chart where it shows all four of them, right? That's all you have to do. That should be so easy to get right. And yet, some people did not get those truth tables correct. Okay, so we did all SRP. What about no SRP? Well, why didn't you look at your notes? It was right there. Okay. Well, Maggie, maybe you're not. Did you get the conjunction one wrong though? I'm not sure because that's the main one that I was talking about, where it just showed, TTFF, TFTF, and then on the middle it shows. Let me think about this. I think it was TFFFF, right? TFFF. So that would mean it's only true if both of the conjuncts are true. Makes it a conjunction. Right. one of those things where you should just know it by looking at it, but if you don't, you can just refer back to your notes. Okay. I'll give you a second. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, just double check next time. Right. Because I'll probably do a similar one. I'll just give you a different truth table for a different operator. Okay. There's only 4 of them. I probably won't do the negation one. That's too easy. So I'm going to do a conditional or a disjunction probably. You should just know what that truth table looks like. And if you don't, just look at your notes or look at the Prezi. Right? I have a nice little chart where it shows each 4 of them in each of the truth tables. So you just have to match it, right? You can basically cheat on that question. Yeah. Well, I'll probably set it up to just take the higher grade, but although Anna, you did well, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think you should do it again, especially because I am just going to take the higher grade. But I also think you could do better. I think you will get a better grade the second time. Okay. Even though it's not strictly necessary, you don't have to. If you're pretty happy with your grade, you don't have to. But I would encourage it. And like I said, if I'm going to take the higher score, there's not really any risk involved. Right? Can only be good. I'll wait 1 second before I keep going. Okay, good. Okay, so we did universal affirmative, all SRP. What about universal negative? No SRP. Right? Let's say we had the statement, no cats are humans. Right? That's correct, isn't it? Sometimes they have human attributes, or we like to anthropomorphize or personify our cats. But literally speaking, no cats are humans. Here we have something that's more scientifically respectable than all squirrels are omnivores, which I'm not sure about. I am sure that no cats are humans. What if we wanted to diagram that, right? It's a universal negative statement. We're saying something about all cats, but we're saying something about the fact that all cats do not belong to the human categories. So we start out the same way. You identify the subject and the predicate. The subject is cats. Right? The predicate is humans. You put the circle with the predicate on the left, and the circle with the subject with the circle with the subject on the left. The subject is cats. The circle with the predicate on the right is humans. Okay. So far, you should be able to do this. This is pretty easy. You're just looking at a single statement. You're identifying the subject and the predicate. The subject is the thing you're talking about. It's the thing that follows all, no, or some. In this case, that's cats. So put that first on the left and put the predicate term, right, the thing that you're saying about the subject, namely that they're humans, put that on the right. Okay. So far, so good. But now, what we want to say is, no cats are humans. So we want to indicate. Now, see if you can figure this out. Using the blackout technique that we just used, where could I put the blackout to show that none of the members of this group are members of this group? We already have the cat circle to show that if you're over here in this area, you're not going to be a cat for sure. Right? This is all just pure human. Right? If you're a cat, you must be inside this circle. But what can we do? Yeah, what do we want to do in the middle? I think I asked you how to use the blackout technique, so I think that's what you're asking. Yes, exactly. Yes. Right. So again, we just shade it to show that there's no cats that live in that overlap. There are no cats that are also humans. There are no members of this group that are also members of this group. And we indicate that by just shading it, blacking it out to show that there's nothing there. Nothing lives in that area. There's no overlap between cats and humans in that way, right? Such that there are cats who are also humans. There are no members of this category, right? There are no citizens of this circle, right? Again, imagine that all the cats are inside the circle, right? So you already know there's no cats out here, there's no cats out here, there's no cats in other circles. All the cats are in this circle. The question is there any overlap with any other groups? In this case, not so with humans. There's no overlap. No cats are humans. There's nothing right in here, right? Whereas earlier we saw, right, this, just to remind you, this leaves open the possibility that there's squirrels who are omnivores. So if you're a squirrel at all, if you exist as a squirrel, you must exist in this part of it. And that indicates that if you're a squirrel, you're an omnivore. This has something slightly different. That if you're a cat, you are not a human. Right? If you're a cat at all, you must exist outside of this little overlap, in here somewhere. Again, this is not really saying that there are any cats at all. It's a weird thing, but it's not saying that cats exist. It's simply saying that if a cat were to exist, it would not be part of the human circle. It would not be part of that category. Okay? So just two more and then we'll be done, okay? And I'll review these next time. But again, hopefully you get the rationale for representing it this way. Hopefully you get that when this says no SRP, we're saying the exact same thing over here. Okay? This has the same meaning, the same information, the same content, right? This diagram simply is saying, it's making the statement, no SRP, right? There's no S's in the P circle. Okay, so just two more, and I'd like to do those. Might not be done right at 1:30, but we might be able to. Now, so we've done those universal ones, and the universal ones always use the blackout technique. Okay, so either one of the universal ones, all or some, all or none, you either put it in the whole left area or you put it right in the middle, right? That's the blackout technique. For the particulars, we're going to use a slightly different technique. We're going to use a little X to indicate at least one member. Right? Remember that that's what some means in logic. In everyday context, the word some usually means multiple things. In categorical logic, it means at least one thing, right? Which in most cases will be multiple things, but we're allowing for at least one thing to count as some. So let's say some dads are grill masters. Right? Suppose we wanted to symbolize that. Well, the first step is the same as for the universal affirmatives. It's exactly the same, right? We just use the two circles to indicate that that these are the groups that we're talking about, right? We're just talking about two different groups, and one is the subject term, dads, the other one is the predicate term, grill masters. Okay, so far so good. Now what we do is we want to say, since we're saying some dads, and that's equivalent to at least one dad, are grill masters. Right? So at least one, we're going to represent that with a little X. X means at least one. There could be more. There probably are more. But X represents at least one. Right? It represents some, in other words. Some in the way that we're talking about here. Right? So we put it, of course, in the overlapping area. Because that means, right, the X means at least one. There's at least one member. There's at least one member of the dads group who is also a member of the grill masters group. Right? So this is equivalent to some dads are grill masters. Right? This time we are making a statement with existential import. We're saying that there is at least one. When you're saying some dads are grill masters, what that's logically equivalent to is, hey, out there in that big wide world, there's at least one dad who's a grill master, right? Again, doesn't matter if that's really true or false. What matters is what's being said, what's being stated, right? And what's being stated is that there's at least one member of the dad category, one member of the dad club, who is also a member of the Grill Masters Club. We're indicating that with a little X. Now notice if I put a little X out here, I would not be saying anything about the Grill Masters directly. Right? It would mean something like there's at least one dad who's not a Grill Master. Now you see what the next one is probably going to be, right? Notice for right now, if you see an X right in the middle, it means there's at least one member here, right? So there's at least one member that belongs to both of these clubs. Yeah, there's at least one of them. Probably many. There are probably many dads who are good at grilling. That's a stereotype after all, right? Okay. There's at least one member of the group who belongs to the dad group, but also the other one, right? So black, total blackout means a complete absence. There's no members in that area. An X means there's at least one member. Okay? So that's what every particular affirmative looks like that. Just like every universal affirmative looks how it looks, with the black on the left all shaded. Every universal negative looks exactly the same. It's got the middle part shaded. Every particular affirmative looks like this. It's got the X in the middle. Okay. And here's one more. The particular negative. What if we have the sentence, some books are not bestsellers? The first step, you know by now, right? Identify the subject term and the predicate term. The subject term is the thing you're talking about, and it's the thing that follows your category word, like some, all, or none. You know? Those, by the way, are called quantifiers. I did not put that in the vocabulary. Maybe I should have. All, some, or none are called qualifiers. But anyway, quantifiers. Anything that comes right after the quantifier, some, all, or no. Yes, anytime you're dealing with a universal, you're going to be shading, and anytime you're dealing with a particular, it's going to be an X. And where do you put it on the diagram? That depends on if it's an affirmative or a negative. I'll show you all four of them in a minute, so you can see each of them. Okay. So for now, if you're to diagram this, you already have the tools to know how to do this, actually, because you know that some is going to be represented with an X. The first step, identify the subject term and the predicate term and put them in the appropriate places. Right. Books on the left, that's the subject term. Bestsellers on the right, that's the predicate term. Now, we want to put the X again, right, because that represents at least one, which again, like I said, means some. Where would I put it? Can you tell? If I put it right in the middle, it would say that there are some books that are bestsellers. Yeah, on the book side, right? There are some books that are not bestsellers, is what we want to say. So for the previous one, it would have been right. Anna, that would have been correct for a particular affirmative. If we wanted to say some books are bestsellers, we'd say, well, there's at least one book that's a bestseller. Okay. But right now we're saying some books are not bestsellers. So that means there's one member of this category, at least one member of the books category, that's not in the bestsellers category. So we'd want to put it over here somewhere. You see? Yeah. Yeah, this should all be in the textbook. I'm a little bit disconnected from the textbook myself. I never got the physical copy. I plan to use it a little bit more, but it also hasn't been that great of a book to use. So it's there as supplementary stuff. You know, if you get tired of me talking all the time, pick up your book and look at it. It's going to have all the basics in there as well. It should certainly have all of this. Okay. So that's it. That's all 4 of them, right? So again, the all statements, you either shade all this or this right here. Some statements, you either put it right here or right here. Right? Now, you could do other things, right? You could put an X in the bestsellers, and that would mean now you're changing basically bestsellers into the subject term, because then you'd be saying there are some bestsellers that are not books. Forget about that for now, okay? Just focus on those 4. So what you're saying is that there's at least one member. Remember, X means at least one, which we're saying is equivalent to some, right? Some books. There are some books, meaning there's at least one book that's not a bestseller, that's not in this group, that's not a member of this category, right? So we put it outside of that circle. See how that works? So every particular negative will look like that, as long as, yeah, as long as that's what the subject is. Okay. So that's it for now. Let's see, I have it up. So next time we'll actually then symbolize 2 premises by adding a 3rd circle, okay? And then you'll see it all come together. For now, just get this in your head, right? Okay, those are your 4 standard symbolized categorical logic statements. Remember, there's just 4 types of statements, and here you have represented how it would look using Venn diagrams. Okay, and you should compare them. You know, the midterm will be reposted. No, I'll try to do it pretty quickly. I just need to change a couple of the questions, right? So I'll try to get it up by tomorrow. How about, yeah? And maybe I'll send out an email to everybody. Okay, so try to get this in your head. Okay, so this is the foundations. This is like your truth tables. Okay, this is like your truth tables for the connectives right here. Very important that you get the symbolism, and it's really good if you understand why the symbolism makes sense the way it's done, right? And you compare them each. Notice that the universal affirmative. Sorry, I was going to make a point, but then I realized that point might make it too confusing. I don't think that'll help. At least understand that anytime you're talking about a universal, you're going to use the blackout technique. Because again, here it's sort of a roundabout way. You're saying none of the S's outside of the P circle, right, exist. There are no S's outside of the P circle. So that's equivalent to, if there's an S, then it's a P, which is equivalent to all S are P, okay? Here we're saying no SRP, meaning there's nothing, right? There's no overlap between these groups. If you're a member of this group, then you're not a member of this group, is what this is saying. This is saying if you're a member of this group, then you are a member of this group, because there's no other choices, right? Here, this is saying some SRP, there's at least one member of the S group that's also a member of the P group. And here we have at least one, right? Some S are not P, meaning they are not part of the P club. Okay? Nobody wants to be part of the P club. Okay, let us be done there. It's a good time to be done. And again, if you had any questions about the midterm, you can email them to me. And if you want me to go over your written work to help you out with that, I can do that as well. Just let me know, okay? So other than that, keep a lookout for the repost of the midterm, and I will see you on Thursday.